Welcome back to Cyber Stories Unlocked, the show where we dive into the journeys of tech leaders, industries experts, and innovators shaping the future of cybersecurity. Today, we have a truly special guest with us, a seasoned professional with over 30 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. He began his career in the world of UNIX as a system integrator, climbing the ranks into leadership roles before making a pivotal shift into cybersecurity. Over the years, his work as a security analyst, vulnerability management expert, and security engineer for major companies like Virgin Media, Telefonica UK, and others. In this episode, we'll explore his incredible transition from Unix to cybersecurity, the key skills that help him thrive, and the invaluable lessons he's learned along the way. So, if you're someone looking to break into cybersecurity or transition from a technical role into cybersecurity, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. So, without any further ado, let's welcome our guest to the show, Rugan. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm great, Rosario. Thank you.
Wow, I'm glad to have you on the show. I mean, you've got an extensive career. You started in the industry when cybersecurity was non-existent, was almost non-existent. Enterprises were growing, but security wasn't a major focus yet. So your perspective must be quite different from many of us today, as you've witnessed and been part of the cybersecurity evolution. So I read your LinkedIn profile. When you entered cybersecurity, you already had a strong technical background, particularly in Linux. How do you think your passion for Linux has influenced your career in cybersecurity?
Um, I think early on, before I got into any professional side of IT, I did study Unix when I was at college, but before then, I started to dabble with Linux, with Red Hat 5.2 was the first one. Though actually, I didn't like that one. I ended up learning with Slackware, for those who know it. And I just like the fact that you had control. You could do everything yourself. I built Windows computers by that point in time, um, and they seemed just too unreliable, I felt. Um, I'd got into trouble with viruses in Windows computers before that, and even before that, and or after that at college. With college had Macs, and they were constantly getting flooded with viruses. But at the same point in time, I was using the Unix and mainframe systems, so we were always nice and happy and sound in that environment. And then every now and then, if we wanted to print a project off, we had to go up to the public college space and use their Macs for doing word processing, and forever risking losing your data because there was another virus on the machine or something like that. And that was just an absolute nightmare. So I really couldn't stand that. So yeah, I've always trusted and liked the fact that you had more control. You just had to know what you were doing and learn more what you're doing, but it was available for you to learn. So that's what attracted me to it.
I see. So obviously you prefer Unix or Linux over other operating systems.
Yeah, I mean, I first started as a kid with an Apple II.
Yeah.
That's what I first started. Back in the days, there was only basic programming. There was no internet. We only learnt by reverse engineering software and playing around with hardware. There wasn't even hard drives, so we had to work in the EPROMs and things like that. Um, so I was very much used to muddling along and working out by myself what to do because no one else was there to teach you.
Yeah.
So me and some friends, we would just hack about and play with it until we got it to do stuff. And 9 times out of 10, we got to break things long before we ever managed to get things to work. So that's what started. But then once I'd got introduced to the more modern world of personal computers, and Windows was becoming popular and stuff like that, but Linux was simmering along in the background, but nobody really knew about it. Once I'd found it, I just didn't want to touch Windows again. I didn't trust it. It was so full of security vulnerabilities and things like that. When I ended up before I even got into professionally, no, it's probably about when I was starting to get professionally into IT. Before I had a family, though, I banned Windows from my household. So everyone in my house has had to learn Linux before anything else. In fact, actually, my son was only allowed to transfer over to Windows once he became an adult and bought his own license. And as far as he's concerned, that's his problem to fix, not mine.
Uh, I can only imagine. That's very interesting. I can only imagine what they went through. I mean, it's a good skill to have, uh, obviously, and to learn it at home, I think it's a plus. So yeah, good job on them. Yeah, so coming back to your career journey, I was reading on your LinkedIn profile, and by the time that you joined cybersecurity, you already obviously spent enormous amount of time, building this foundation with on Unix, and you joined cybersecurity as a senior professional. So how was the transition?
Before that, did actually have technically a security role, but it started as a team leader.
Yep.
When I first got into IT formally and actually was recognized as being part of IT, working in bank, I was working in the Unix administration team. I became a team leader for the live support team, and we recognized that there was this gap. People, there's a lot of compliance and regulatory compliance in a bank. There always is, and but nothing was done. This was still in the day where Unix was very much well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So nobody patched anything. And regulatory compliance and things like that. And Sarbanes-Oxley was on the horizon and things like that. And people are saying, there's vulnerabilities out there and you never patch. And Unix was getting actually quite a bad reputation for that. But at the same point in time, it was never broken. So it was a hard reputation to pin to it. Yeah. But I could see that this was something that was going to change. Regulations were going to enforce it. So off my own back and with a little bit of lobbying of senior management, I created a Unix security team, and they allowed me to recruit a team. Started with 4 people. At one point in time, I'd grown to about, I think it was either 12 or 16 people we had in there. And we were proactively looking at the vulnerabilities on the Unix platforms. We had, there's most of the AIX, there was Solaris, there was SCO Open Server and SCO Unixware. So no Linux in that environment at all. But we had, I think, over 600 servers that we were looking at, which in those days was quite big. There was no containerization, no cloud or anything like this. It's all physical tin. And whenever we had to go and patch things, we actually had to go there physically and do it. So it was quite something. But we managed to spend our time proactively looking at the vulnerabilities in there and making recommendations on how to bring the systems up to date, to resolve the issues, and therefore get it to a state where it would pass a compliance audit.
Right.
So that's what first started, and we did that for a few years. I can't remember quite how many years it was. Though it was a kind of a bit of a rocky end to it, because the business still weren't committed to paying for this. So that they entertained, yes, we need to do it. And it was only the fact that there was a compliance reason that they sort of wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But at the same point in time, they were outsourcing their IT to a third party. And so everything got very messy. So that's kind of when I moved out of that area and then moved to another business to become senior analyst.
So when you say that companies, back then didn't want to invest much, but they just wanted to do enough to be compliant, do you think that's a problem or an issue that companies nowadays are still facing?
Some businesses far more than others.
Yeah.
I mean, the businesses, they operate on the bottom line. So if it's going to affect their share value, then it'll get addressed. If they can get away without it, then they're not going to do it. More and more businesses are getting to, they're accepting that they have to take security seriously. But they're still wary. You end up in high level meetings and trying to win that security conversation. You've got to be quite smart at that point in time. You can't push too hard, otherwise you'll just get shut down and pushed out of the equation or replaced. You've got to still allow them to run a business, because you can secure things to the nth degree and be happy in your security. But if they can't make a profit or expand the business goes and you ain't got a job left. So you still got to balance that. And so, you know, the people who make the decisions, the senior execs, it's a risk thing. That's what you need to learn to speak the language of risk. Best practice is great. We all know that there's best practice and we all should follow it. And most people who are technical in the industry have far better idea of what the best practice should be. But then you have to be pragmatic and you can't lock things down to the extent where the business can't move anymore.
I'm very curious about how security was implemented back then because I always hear like companies weren't building with security. It was more something, you know, that it will be added later on. What do you think it was the biggest challenges back then when it came to cybersecurity?
Every step of the way, you were fighting against existing practices, people being able to get a job done and progress and develop or sell or whatever the business function was. Security has always been seen, or certainly was always seen at that point in time, as something that got in the way of business. It was a blocker to doing things. They expected you to be the no person.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my career trying to turn that round and trying to show how working with security, I can actually be an enabler to make your process, your service, your business function actually more efficient. Not because I've made it more secure, but in the process of doing that, I've identified how it can work better by taking away problems that may or may not have been so visible, but giving them credibility of how that problem will slow them down or become a blocker. So that's what I've very much tried to do, and always being open to having conversations. I've spent a lot of time talking with business so that they can understand what the problem is and trying to help them through it and see it. I'll spend time to try and understand the problem from their perspective, and in doing so, then help them understand the challenges from my perspective. Right. So that's how I always try to look at it.
When it comes to technology, nobody's ahead. I mean, professionals as well as tools, you know, both are always trying to catch up with what's going on and how to operate the best and how to enhance whatever current processes slash procedures we have in place. But yeah, I mean, you said something like cybersecurity, you know, so was always suspected to be a blocker. But I think the message also would be, um, you know, it is not, but it should be a thought when something is being developed, when the business is growing, when new technology is being implemented. You know, apart from if it's the business requirements, probably does a take. But I also, you know, is this secure from the perspective of a security professional? Yeah, good points. Um, so now, moving a little bit from the technical side and going into the management or leadership role, um, tell us about what are the takeaways that you actually look for when you are hiring a new person in your team? Obviously, if somebody who wants to join a junior position, what are yeah, I mean, if somebody's listening, what they have to be working on?
Over and above all, the attitude and an inquisitive mindset has always been my top criteria. Technology, you can learn. Certification, I've got mixed feelings about certification. There's a lot of certification that, yeah, sure, you've got that piece of paper, but can you now do the job? No. Unless you actually worked at it and got the experience, just because you got paper doesn't mean you can do it.
Yeah.
Some qualifications are better than others. You know, if someone's come through a degree, they've shown that they've got commitment. They've shown that they can apply themselves to something, but not necessarily whether they've got the skills to do the job they're looking at. Because if someone comes into our industry and they don't have that inquisitive mindset, that desire to actually find the true cause of some behavior, or it can be from debugging something to just being curious about how something operates, or to seeing whether you can make something do more than it was originally meant to do. If you haven't got that, to be honest, the majority of security is very boring.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, we can't emphasize anymore on those two facts. But you also said that it's boring, you know. Yeah, it can be. It could be. But so how do you keep yourself motivated?
When I was
Yeah.
when I was a kid and first got into computers, I knew it was just such an exciting whole concept. And I often say to people, I think in one sense, and I don't know whether I really literally mean it, but I make fun of myself for it. I call myself being lazy because the reason I'm in computers is because I want the computer to do my work for me.
Yeah.
I never really appreciated when I was young and thought that and stuck that into my mentality, how much effort it actually takes to get the computers to do what you want for you. And then you start thinking about, but if I get the computer to do the work for me, how much can I get someone else's computer to do something else for? Not what that person wanted to do. And that gets into, I mean, I often like to, and the term gets abused, I feel nowadays, and lots of people in the industry, I'm sure, share this, but the hacker term. A hacker's not someone malicious. That's a malicious hacker, maybe, but a hacker, I would have called myself a hacker. At any point in time I look at not just technology, but anything, I'm always trying to find ways of getting it to do more things, not necessarily things that it's designed to do. And sometimes it's really not wise to get them to do other things, but I'm always looking. I can't pick anything up without trying to do something more with it. Does mean I break a lot of things, but at the same point in time, I'm always thinking about that. And that's just when I first got into computers, what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it do things for me. And no one had told me what its limitations were, so I was always pushing it. A friend of mine and myself, we would write software programs for each other and swap them. And they were just little tests, but if you got it wrong, we were starting to wipe each other's chips and things like that. But we were so in tune with the sound of our machines that as soon as you heard the sound was changed, it's quickly powered off, ripped the disk out, got a clean disk that you knew was safe, and tried boot it up and see if you've got anything left. And some of the times you'd do it and you'd be smelling smoke before you'd even done it. It's like, oh, there goes another chip. You rip another one out, you get your soldering iron out, and you were replacing chips on your board. So it was just that mentality of playing around with it and doing more stuff. So why did I want to do it? I just enjoy playing. I just have that fun. Just last week when I had the week off, I decided, oh, what should I? Oh, hang on, I'm going to start teaching myself Go because I've been wondering about that for a while.
Go.
Yeah, it's Google's language.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's just very streamlined. It's efficient. It's a compiled language. You can compile it statically, so it works very well in any platform, and is suitable for very much designed around putting into containers and cloud environments and distributing widely and quickly. So it's something that compared to other elements of IT, I've not done much of. So I wanted to start changing that.
Rue, you sound very passionate about, developing, coding, making things work for you. Would you consider yourself perhaps leaning a little bit more on the developer side, within the cyber industry?
When I started, I mean, there was no concept of the security role.
Yeah.
There was no concept. Well, no, there was concept of development as I saw it I don't know, I was probably 12 years old or something like that. I remember thinking, and I did try writing some games in BASIC and things like that in those days. I mean, they're quite atrocious, to be honest, but I did try. And it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. It took a lot of work. And I thought, this is such an exciting thing. I bet everyone's going to want to do this. And I remember making a mental choice. There's going to be far too much competition. I don't know if I'm up to it. But I also love data, and I love messing around with analyzing vast quantities of data and things like that. So I kind of thought there's going to be probably more money and more success if I focus on doing IT stuff for business rather than games. So that was my first switch.
Right.
Once I finally got into doing business stuff, and it wasn't with Unix systems, the first IT stuff I was doing in business before I even got into the Unix administration was I was writing some software for auditing the bank terminal systems. So you go to your shop and you put your card in to a terminal. So I was auditing all the configuration on those and things like that. And so that was the first bit. And I wasn't employed as a programmer or anything like that. I was writing the algorithms to analyze the data that they were pulling back from it so that we could know what terminals were out there and which ones were working well, which ones having lots of errors, and just analyzing vast quantities of data. And that still to this day is actually one of the elements I enjoy the most. And that's why security analysis actually works well, because I just love working through lots of data.
All these skills that you acquire through life, I'll say, because it's not just on the professional side. You also have done this, when with your friends as a hobby, but developing coding, curiosity, keeping learning yourself different programming languages, or keeping yourself motivated in the ways that you enjoy this career. Do you think these skills somehow put you in a good position when you were applying to jobs? Would you actually recommend these skills to some newcomers into the industry?
I think people come into the industry from different directions. I've got where I've got, I think probably the hard way.
Okay.
I didn't do all my college stuff. I dropped out,
Yeah.
and I've never properly kept up on my education bit. I've done most of my learning through doing. And a lot of the time I didn't have someone there to really teach me. So I've taught myself and worked out the long way around. Nowadays, there's such a plethora of resources that you can use to teach yourself to lots of different sides. And to begin with, I mean, lots of people get attracted to security because they want to be the hacker, the romantic image that Hollywood portrays, and etc. like that, which is great. And I think that's good if you've got the mindset to work with that. And that is taking that hacker mentality of pushing technology beyond its design, because that's all they're doing. So it's in there, the terminology is correct. And you've got to have that mindset. If you don't have that mindset, you're never going to be a successful pen tester or someone like that. You might be someone who can go and run compliance audits and run the tools and produce the work sort of thing, but you're never going to be one of those ones who excels and really enjoys doing what they're doing. And I've worked with quite a lot of pen testers, and you've worked with the ones who, they can turnkey, go into a company, do an audit, produce a report, and go home at the end of the day. And then I've worked with the ones who they go in there, they find something that's just a little bit odd, and all of a sudden they're off on one. And they're writing a new reverse proxy for SMS emergency channel or something like that. And they're all of a sudden finding a new zero-day exploit. We're reporting it to the vendor. The vendor's then trying to lawsuit you because you've broken their code, and it ends up in the courts for 9 months or something like that. But if you don't have that spark, you're never going to work well there. That doesn't go for a security analyst, though. You and I, we do a job. Are we anything like pen testers in this job? No. Does it help you if you're in this job? Yeah,
100%.
But if your mentality is that of someone who can be the pen tester, you will be bored as a SOC analyst. You will not stay. You can do it for a bit, and then you'll want to move on. A lot of people might view being a security analyst as a more of a foot in the door job. I've known a lot of people who have started their careers coming in through this, and I've recruited a lot of them in some of my previous SOCs. In that sense, the curiosity is still a requirement. You need that thirst for understanding. And so very much I return to that. If you haven't got that, just don't look really sorry.
Yeah. No,
but
it's
if you do, get yourself, there's a lot you can do yourself if you've not got the formal tuition. But I mean, online, there's so much free stuff, but also, give yourself a Linux VM to play with. Go and try some of these hack the box or other capture the flags systems. Get Splunk on your system at home. How many people I've talked to who want to get to the industry, it's like, have you ever looked at your broadband router's logs? Like, what? Yeah, you're not ready. Have a look at your own logs.
Splunk. Ooh. Oh, I'm a big fan. But yeah, that's true. I mean, if you can deploy it, why not? I actually have a friend who did that, and you can get 500 megabytes for free. So it's a good skill to have. And if I could be wrong here, but I think it's one of the top market leads in SIEM solutions. So yeah, there you go. Another hint. Um, the root, you know, I'm still curious. Like I don't, I feel that knowing Linux is a good skill to have. It might not be either you are on the attacking or defense teams, um, and it might not be explicit in your job description, but do you feel like you've got advantage having this strong Unix background over other candidates?
I think it does help. If you're going down the pen testing route, then while it is possible to do pen testing from a Windows platform, if you're using a Mac or even a Linux machine, then you've got Linux or Unix, if you're talking Mac, BSD anyway, underneath the hood. So you're utilizing those same skills. And at which point I tend to just refer it as NIX because there's enough crossover. And limiting yourself to Windows in that realm, while is possible, and Windows PowerShell and things like that does do amazing things. It's probably one of the better things that Microsoft have developed.
PowerShell, very powerful.
It is. But then again, now you can run Bash on Windows. So, hey, prestos, they finally realized they were still missing out on something. Um, so I think it is, even if you're on a Windows, you need to understand command line. And that's the key thing. It's not necessarily the fact that it's a Linux one now. It's the fact that you need to be familiar with using command line. That can be PowerShell. It can be any one of a plethora of Unix, Linux, or BSD shells. Whether it's, I mean, Z shell is very popular now. It's a wonderful shell to use. But from my day, I started with using Corn shell or even T shell, C shell sometimes. Gone through quite a few of them. Bash is very good because it works actually the same across all platforms, whereas Corn shell doesn't. I've done quite a bit of cross-platform development on that side and tripped over that very badly. So yeah, Bash is great for there, but now Z shell does the same. So that's the next one that's really good. But yeah, it definitely helps.
It definitely helps, huh? Yeah.
If you're not confident on the command line, you will struggle because you can't point and click to everything.
Well, moving a little bit more on the junior position for somebody who's already in the industry, but as a junior, what do you think are the skills that as a junior they should be focusing on in the beginning of their career?
Working in a seam, which yes, there's great tools for it. There's some free ones. We've already mentioned one. There's others out there. It doesn't really matter what, you can have something built on the Elk stack or whatever. They all provide a mechanism for sifting and mangling through data. Even, to be honest, do it in Excel or numbers, that's Max one or Open Office or whatever, or even just with your greps and finds and doing it on a command line, but being able to manipulate large amounts of data and filter and pivot for what you need. Because no matter what tools you use. The tool just determines what commands or what method you use to cut and slice data up to find what you want.
Yeah.
You've got so much white noise, you need to filter out the white noise and focus on something.
I got you. I got you. So to highlight, it would be being comfortable to work in the command prompt or the command line, uh, you know, being able to massage big data or analyze big data, perhaps for creation of a timeline and be comfortable on SIEM.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a tool to work with the data.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned timeline there, and really that is an important thing. I often, when I've spoken to new analysts and things like that, um, I like working as an analyst is kind of like looking through um, looking through a portal, like a window, and the messages, the logs are all going past your window. You can't see the beginning, what started it. You can't see the end of what's happened at the end, but you've got to try and interpret what's happened from what you can see. Sometimes you might be able to influence one end or the other and see how it changes, but you're still inferring what is the nature, because all you get to see is the logs. The analyst typically doesn't have the access that the developer has, that they can actually test things and see what happens, or the pen tester who can make things happen and see a different result. We just get to see the bit in the middle. But ultimately, our job is about creating a story. You've got breadcrumbs, and you need to follow it back to the beginning of the story and follow it to the end of the story and try and tell that story. And that's why I try to teach analysts, because it's one thing finding data and things like that, but unless you can put it into the context of what's happening, it's useless. So that's kind of the first step for an analyst, is being able to understand data and look for it and find what they want. Part of that command line to be able to work with it, part of it being able to work with data. But they'll never move beyond that unless they can then put it into context. So, and that context then beyond just the story is then understanding of how that story is actually relevant to whatever business you're in. Because it's one thing saying, oh, this web server is really vulnerable to this type of attack, and we've seen this happening. But maybe it's a developer, or maybe it's an attack. But actually then understanding how important was that web server to the business. Oh, well, it's just part of this infrastructure, whereas actually that element is far more important, or vice versa. If you don't have that understanding, then again, you will either be talking to the business and trying to get them to react to something that they have already realized. They might get scared with what you say and then realize, but you're talking about something they don't really actually care about. Or you might underplay something that they'll think, oh, but hang on a minute, that's actually really serious. They might miss what you meant. So that takes it up those steps and levels of how you can operate in the business.
Right. So we've talked about from multiple perspective, from a mentee, for an interviewer, for a person who's already in the industry, for a newcomer, how to break into the industry, what skills to have. But for somebody who's already in the industry and the person is feeling that want to move to the next level in a generic way, and your perspective on this point, what do you think they should be focusing on?
Two things that come to mind. Links to that context with the business, but we have to be pragmatic to extent, and it can be very easy, especially when you're at the lower level, but you have a skill at finding things, to then find things everywhere, because there's an awful lot of problems once you start digging into it. Yet actually an awful lot of it is because a lot of developers don't follow best practice, and they do things in the way that generate an awful lot of alarms and scares for us. Understanding where that is and being able to make a judgment call and balancing that versus then it's kind of an instinctive thing on telling the difference. You've got 10 things in front of you, or which one do I focus on? Which one's more likely to be the developer not behaving as you wish they would, compared to someone actually doing something internally malicious or even externally? A lot of my experience has actually ended up focusing on internal behaviors, just because that's often been more visible to a business focus that I've been working under in what their own staff have been doing, for right or for wrong. But so understanding that, being able to prioritize work, because when you step up to a senior level, and you know this yourself, you've got to be able to make that call when there's suddenly a flood of work to do, a flood of alerts to analyze. You can't deal with them all.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many teams, how many people you have, you always will get to a stage at some point in time where you can't do it all. What do you focus on? And you've got to be able to assess that quickly, which also means, and that's the second point, is staying calm. I don't like seeing analysts who panic about everything.
Yeah.
And that's something you'll more often see from a junior analyst, because they're saying something and it matches, especially if they're a lot of the training that you get nowadays, they'll show you some really bad stuff. But it's rare that you actually see that in real life, because those training scenarios tend to be, well, they're the ideal circumstances to maliciously do something. They're the things you might see from a pen test. Do you see them from an actual attacker? Well, maybe a very amateur one, which one, to be honest, you're probably not actually that worried about. Because if someone's still doing that, yeah, they've probably got limited life in them. And I'd like to think most systems nowadays should be protected against most of that stuff.
That's what we'd like to think.
Well, we'd like to think. How many times have we seen the red teams or purple teams just blast straight through that? Never mind, another topic. So yeah, keeping calm, assessing priority, and developing an instinct, threat-wise.
Threat-wise, okay.
As to looking at something and having that instinct to, I don't know exactly what that is, and I don't know exactly what that is, two things next to the other, but that one concerns me more. Not quite sure why. I just have a feeling about it. Gut instinct. Some people get it, some people don't. I don't think you can teach it. I think that's something that you just gain from experience. And it's not to say that you're right.
Yeah. It comes with experience.
Yeah. And everybody makes mistakes and misses something. One thing I've always been very adamant about as a team leader, as a manager, is I will always support my team as long as whatever judgment they made was appropriate for the state of information they had available at the time. They may learn something afterwards that would have changed their mind, but that's afterwards. We can always look back with 2020 vision and wish we'd done something else. But at the time, they made the call that seemed right.
Ooh, that's a very touchy topic, prioritization. And I mean, if I say hypothetically, putting three scenarios out there, what would be your response? For example, scenario A, as a C-level executive has clicked on a confirm phishing email. Scenario B, where a user has reported some pop-ups on their laptops that suddenly appeared, and scenario C, where a server keeps rebooting after 2 hours after being patched. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a wrong or right answer here, but what would be your perspective on this?
It's a business, and you've got to entertain your C-levels, whether it's right or wrong. So you need to give a response to them. They need to be happy. Yeah. They need to certainly be heard.
Yeah.
So you will need to acknowledge that. At the same point in time, given those scenarios, I'd want to understand the potential risk or the threat based upon that user and what access they have available. If they're just a call center user or something like that had next to no access, okay, that will get dropped down a bit. If it's someone who's a developer or an admin who has access to this, that, and the other, or maybe a financial senior manager or something like that, all of a sudden that one actually I would probably treat maybe the most serious, because especially then you've got a server that's rebooted, but it's been recently patched. And then I need to tag someone onto, well, get the developer or the admin who's done that. I want him to go and dig into that, but to report back quickly.
Yeah.
Just in case. But I'm probably not concerned about that, because that's probably they've just got something dodgy on their software. that's just an innocent problem.
Yeah, I probably will do the same.
I have had one in a previous role. It was an interesting scenario where it was a credit to a senior finance manager who questioned something just at that last moment before signing a financial transfer for a supplier. It was all within expected realms and things like that. But at the last moment, they just thought, hang on, I'm just going to double check that little piece of information. And they were basically listening. They'd had a gut instinct. There was something about a conversation that they'd had that had just had them slightly on edge. So they went back to double check it. And the account it was paying to had changed, but no one had flagged it to them.
Wow.
And the process that should have caught that had failed. And they didn't see it at the time. Some of the money was already transferring from a previous one, but because of the nature of things, they were able to contact the bank straight away. The funds were frozen, and a little bit of money got through to these attackers, but compared to the quantity they were actually expecting to get, it was very minor. And that was because of a third-party compromise. The third party had been truly compromised. But, they got in touch with us. We were able to then spend that time, first of all, making sure that that senior exec was listened to.
Yep.
They had a serious issue. And then helping them take control of dealing with the third party, because it was a third party who at that point in time hadn't realized they'd been compromised. And it was their exec. So no one we had direct relationship with, and also it wasn't even in our language. So we had to deal through different parties. But it was as much a political response as anything else, because we had no direct response, but it was very much talking the right talk, but getting them on side and understanding their side of the threat and what they felt. And that was just quite an interesting one. And talking about sea levels and that is.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting story. Well, at the end, it was intuition of the person who was initiating the payment stop from being, a bigger attack or a bigger loss to the company. So that's good. I mean, like you say, intuition, intuition for a threat. So now that we're moving on to organizations, what do you think organizations should be focusing on to keep up with modern threats?
That's always a challenge. Modern threats, and I think the constant, and I think probably never-ending challenge is the pure nature that from any organization, and it's not just something around the security of a company and cybersecurity, as we call it nowadays. But it's the same thing if you're talking about physical security, going back through and in military terms and things like that. A defender has to defend everything. The attacker only has to find one route before they can get in. And that's so much true with ourselves because you can't see the attackers necessarily. It's so much easier to obfuscate. So that's the challenge, is being able to understand what are the risks that you could be open to. So you need to understand the business that you operate in, what the threats are, and where they're more likely to be exploitable. So you can then focus your defense. But then technology moves so fast.
Yes.
Obviously, we were going to get on to talking about AI at some point in time here.
I was hoping.
Yeah. And it's I mean, I've spent a lot of time myself playing around with AI because I think we need to understand it. We need to see how much it can benefit us and how much it's a threat to us. I've used it an awful lot with not necessarily just technology, also some personal projects and things like that. And I think even artwork and stuff like that. Don't worry, I'm not stealing other people's copyrights. I fully support people getting paid for it if it's their own stuff. I mean, the one thing, just taking that little side tangent, that I don't see as a threat from AI, it can't create something from nothing. It's only certainly the AI large language models that we have at the moment, the way that works, It's working from example. It's taking lots of example and then delivering something. But what that does mean it's good at is coding.
True.
To a degree.
To a degree, yes.
I've done quite a lot of attempts at coding and things like that. And I every now and then when new versions come out, I'll try different projects and things like that. My little experience last week with Go, I had an idea one night. By the next morning, within 3 to 4 hours, I had a working application that I turned into an API using a Go executable. I had a website that was built that would then interact with that API. And so that was a working model on day one. Day two, I started to expand that. And this was largely, and I was taking it just as a learning opportunity, and also because actually using an AI meant it was quicker because it could type quicker than me.
Yes.
I mean, in my best day when I was typing a lot, I could do 100 words a minute, but I'm not like that now. I don't quite type enough anymore, and my fingers aren't as quick as they are. So, being able to copy and paste blocks of text, but I'm very mindful, and especially mindful when you're taking it from AI, is hang on, have you stuck to that design principle consistently to the last answer you gave me? You've just given me a block of text for a block of code that I can paste in to cover that one. But hang on a minute. Now you're referring to that variable differently than you referred to it 2 versions ago. So now all of a sudden that's broken something. That consistency, it doesn't keep it.
Okay.
It can help you develop things very quickly. We were watching that YouTube the other night where they were getting the phone scammers.
Yes.
And they talked about using AI because it was a quick method of generating an exploit. It wrote one up and it got them there and running within like 5-10 minutes or something like that.
Absolutely. It's not only introducing efficiency in the good way, but also in the other way.
It can indeed. The golden rule, I think, within what I've seen so far, is it can help people who are new to something get into it because it can get you that first over those first hurdles of, well, how do I get this started? How do I first learn to do something? How do I first analyze this? I've often actually gone and used it as just a more interactive and a better response method for, oh, there's a command I'm not familiar with. I would always beforehand, I'd have gone to the man page.
Before?
Now I can just go and chuck that into an AI and say, what does this do? And it'll give me chapter and verse. It's like, oh, that's very useful. I don't want to read all that. Summarize that bit for me. I only want that bit. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. You've given me in English. Now give me a reference for where you got that from, because I don't actually trust you. Yeah. Click. Is that what they said? Yeah, that's what they said. Okay, carry on. And so it can get you that first step. How much further can it get you? That becomes questionable because it's not consistent at the moment. Yeah. It can't carry things on longer term. So if you build things if you're careful about how you use it, I think it's very powerful. And that works for the good and for the bad. Yes, they try and put in no end of protections for, oh, don't write this bad stuff and things like that. But we're talking about a community that wholly exists on getting things to do what you didn't want it to do. So it's never going to take them long to work out how to get an AI to do what you didn't want it to do. And that is to write their bad stuff for them. Yeah. But to be honest, those malicious communities were well capable of doing that before AI. So it's just speeded up and made their process more efficient.
Yeah, I think so.
And enabled less skilled people to get into it. But without the skill, and it's the same on both sides, if I didn't know if I didn't have the experience I had with coding, I wouldn't have noticed the inconsistencies that the AI is giving me. I might have just dumped it and think, oh, now why is it broken?
That is absolutely true. I mean, I could go to AI, even though I can get an assistant from AI to either learn a language or just get the script from there. I would still need to have some knowledge to understand or identify errors. That's true. I haven't actually thought about it. But yeah, talking about AI and technology evolution, is there any particular topic that you're looking forward to, or perhaps you are concerned about it?
I think everybody's got understandable concerns about our the data about us, the analysis of who we are by all the big data systems and what that says about people, and how much we do or don't trust the companies who go and collect that data compared to them actually then keeping that data safe, because maybe they're doing a good job and keeping your data safe, but they always lose sometimes. What happens then? What do people get about it? We hear a lot about identity fraud, the amount of data that comes out about things. We've probably all known someone who's had their identity stolen, probably without them even realizing what they did wrong that led to it. They may not have even had an involvement. It might have just been because they used a common password somewhere, or maybe not. They just didn't use an extremely strong one, and a site got hacked, a password database got dumped, and someone eventually reversed their hash, and got their credentials and had eventually got access to their email or something like that. And from that point in time, you just take over someone's life.
Yeah.
It's so much reliance on technology. And while the public, the people not in our industry, are getting more and more aware of it, but also more and more scared of it at both sides, because it's difficult for them to understand how real is the threat. They hear the bad stuff. The press and media really blow some of the bad stuff out of proportion. There's some simple things people can do to try and protect themselves, but they're never going to be foolproof. So it's a very much a balancing act, and you add AI to that as just a compound issue. Never mind, that's without even getting to talk about quantum computing and where in the hell that's going to take us, because everything we can consider doing starting to become realistic now just becomes seconds away with the potential of quantum computing. Yeah, it's where is that going to go? I've noticed in the younger generations with my children and their social groups an acceptance of just letting, but I want to do that. Okay, yeah, whatever, have my data. Yeah, sure, click. Okay.
Next.
Yeah, next. Do you agree to these terms and conditions? There should always be, I've thought for ages, there should be that button that says, I'm letting you do this, but I haven't read it.
Well,
Just to make sure people acknowledge, yeah, whatever. I'm just TLDR, can't be bothered. Because I'll read through your stuff. I read some large social companies' terms and conditions when they were first starting coming out, and periodically I'm that sad. I've dived into reading all of them.
okay.
And I mean, even 15 years ago, getting a mobile phone or whatever, and I was going through their terms and conditions, and it was like 18 to 20 pages worth of very legalese terminology, which I've done a lot of audit stuff. So I had a reasonable idea of exactly what they're saying and thinking, and it's like, you actually want me to sign that? Well,
Really?
I want to use the phone, so I'm going to have to, because otherwise I can't. But nowadays it's more like 30 to 40 pages. It's just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's pretty much across the board with anything and everything you do. All of these terms and conditions are mad. Nobody understands
Do
them.
you recall any line in particular?
I remember, without mentioning one of the new social media platforms, when it came out, explicitly stated in their terms and conditions that you agreeing to use their software gave them the right to access all of your contact data on your mobile device for the sole purpose of selling to third parties.
Wow.
And at that point in time, that social media platform didn't even use TLS on their communications.
Unencrypted.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Not a lot of, I think it's kind of hard to not read terms and conditions. I mean, every time we install an application on our phone, so we just sign up for new services. Uh, I'm sure that there is people who will read them, but um, might be hard to find them. And I mean, I'm gonna talk from my own experience, and usually when you want to install or get something done, you just, kind of go like, yeah, scroll up, scroll down, and then next.
Jumped off on a tangent myself, which you've made me think of, and I can't believe I've not done this yet. The next terms and conditions I'm going to get to are going straight into an AI to ask it to summarize for me. And I'm actually going to maybe build my own GPT and build it up with a repertoire of different companies and that terms and conditions and summaries of them and what to look out for. And I could even maybe make that a public one. So that's an example of just taking an idea and running with it and trying to make use of the AI.
Well, there you go. You just came up with a business idea. Well, I don't know if somebody wants to do a collab and is listening to this, I think it's a good idea, Yeah, you can reach out to Rue. I wanna, transition into a different topic because obviously for those listeners who are in the IT industry and they thinking about moving on to cybersecurity, what would be some of your advice? Perhaps any last tip, because we already covered the part of the skills, and but yeah, any last tip that you would like to add before?
I think there's what's available to people nowadays. There's a few things I think any individual needs to be doing to be taken seriously. If they're already in IT and they're wanting to do this, let's assume they've got that thirst for knowledge and they're familiar with their environments and everything like that. I think, and certainly when I'm interviewing, I'm interested to know that someone is doing things on their own. If they're wanting to make a break into the industry, are you doing it because you're interested and you want to do it? At which point in time, you really want to do it and that to become good at it, or are you just doing it because you think there's more money in it? If you're really someone who really wants to do it because that's where you want to go, why aren't you doing it at home? I want to know what you do at home. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be security, but I want to know that you're pushing the boundaries of what you're financially capable of achieving, and that will vary from one person to the next because they might be trying to get into it because they don't have much funding. At which point in time they can't afford to have another PC or one with enough memory to run this VM and that VM. But they've got a broadband router, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do they look at logs? Do they do something with it? Have they necessarily tried it? Have they gone through their settings? Have they changed their basic admin password? Have they practiced some of the basics themselves? Because if they haven't, go away. I'm not interested, to be honest, if you've not even thought about your own environment.
So, yeah.
That's one side.
Yep.
Internet, we talked about it briefly, the amount of stuff that's available. You need to start learning. Don't wait for someone to feed you. If you want to be involved, go and get the information. Show me what you're doing to learn to become part of the industry. And there's countless different avenues you can go in. And you probably, if you're new to it and don't know where to go, you probably don't know which one to do. But unless you're trying one of them, you're never going to know which one suits you.
Yeah.
So talk to people, get involved with people, and try things. Try capture the flag. Try some of the blue team scenarios or something like that. Try and get hold of some data analysis tools and play with it. And that then also leads on to, I mentioned, talking to people. Networking. I'm not a great person for networking myself. I'm too much of an introvert. I find social media a bit of a angst, really, to be honest. Though I've abused it many times in the past with enumerating potential targets and things like that when I've worked more on a grey side. But that's also led me to have a bit of a distrust for it. I don't like what information's about me. Though I'm sure anyone listening to this, if they go and spend their time, I'm going to dread what things people will find out. But because I have become more slack in age, because I've got bored of being too pessimistic about it. And I'm starting to get suckered into the younger generation.
Oh, good for you.
But I still don't, yeah. It's talking to people about it to get their experience is good. But ultimately, no matter what of all those threes you do, you've also got to make the step of actually trying. Start applying. It doesn't matter which ones.
Yeah.
Go for it. Because until you sit through, anyone who's been in business, until you've had some interviews, you don't know what an interview's like. Yes. Until you've gone for an interview for a cybersecurity role, you're not going to have faintest idea what they're going to ask you.
Correct. Yeah.
to try.
Right.
At the same point in time, I've known some people who have managed to make that step. Yeah, absolutely, because of networking, physical networking, because they've been talking to someone who they work with as a colleague who is in the cybersecurity, and they've got talking, and eventually an opening came up, and it was just like, why don't you go for it? Because there's been that realization that this person's got the interest.
Yeah.
And again, that's networking to then demonstrate that you're enthusiastic, that you're trying to make a progression. So it's being able to demonstrate that, and to that, you also have to be doing it yourself.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, totally. I mean, networking also plays a big part when it comes, to landing on the job. Um, but do you think also certifications would be a good plus? I understand, and I remember that you earlier mentioned that you're not a big fan of, but
They do serve a purpose because they show commitment, that someone's had the intention and then committed and determination to go through with it. They also give confidence to an individual to make them feel they've at least learned something. And if you're talking at the lower levels, they do demonstrate. I remember when I first did my CEH, it's like, yay, certified ethical hacker. Does that mean I'm a pen tester now? No, no. Have I ever been employed as a pen tester? No. How would I rate myself against pen testers I've met? Yeah, I'd maybe get away at the beginning.
Yeah.
But at this stage in my career, I'm not willing to take a salary cut to start at where I'm suitable as a pen tester.
Yes.
But I can pass the course.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, if you're new at it, it's a good introduction. So a lot of those lower level, the CompTIA ones, if someone's not got any cybersecurity or security skills, taking those CompTIA certifications, taking CEH, and things like that, they are very good starting points to get you into it. Right. If you're coming from IT already, then most of that stuff you should probably know, or it shouldn't be a hard thing for you to do.
Yeah, completely agreed. I think certifications, in my opinion, uh, they give you like a solid foundation, and also tips and different methodologies that you could apply on the hands-on role. So yeah, definitely a good plus. Um, just to like a bit of a controversial topic. I think a lot of people are going to have different opinions on this, but through the years, for you, in your own perspective, is there anything that you see that has stayed the same within cyber?
Yeah, users.
Jackpot, yeah.
I mean, where would we be without them? If there's no users, there's
There's no
nothing,
job.
etc. But things would be so much easier without them.
Yeah. Users. No, that's
They keep you on your toes. Like you've talking to your exec, you can't disregard users. They're the whole purposes of us existing. There's the business, but if the business doesn't have users, there's no business. So it's definitely something you need, but that hasn't changed as much. It's you can trust a user to do something in the worst possible way. I don't want to use the necessary derogatory terms of it, but it doesn't matter how well you explain something, someone else will misinterpret that and they will do it not how you wanted it.
Yeah.
And that will cause some sort of issue. And that's one thing that's quite consistent. And I don't see a reason will ever change. And to be honest, that even goes for AI. I've asked, you can ask it with no end of questions, and sometimes you get the answer back, like, what? I didn't ask that. Or maybe you then look back and think, okay, I see how you misinterpreted what I said because I wasn't clear enough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not a fault of user. Maybe that's a fault of, the teacher kind of aspect of it, but it's that human element, um, and being replicated by AI, perhaps sometimes.
Wow, yeah, I mean, I love the answer. Will that change? Probably not.
It doesn't matter how much security you put around someone's, whether it be biometrics or password or whatever, uh, a physical threat is still far superior if that situation comes about. Yeah. From our perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, we can't do a lot about that. Yeah. We can look out for inconsistencies, and we have to then approach that heuristic side of it to see if hadn't someone's user behavior has suddenly changed. And we've got lots of nice tools to do that if we take the time to tune them and understand them. That's another another chapter.
Yeah, so true. Interesting as well topic to explore more. But before we finalize this, I would like to do some rapid questions. Uh, yeah, good, sweet. So, favorite cybersecurity framework or cybersecurity tool?
I'd probably end up with either saying Python or Splunk.
One book or resource that you would recommend to a cybersecurity professional?
In all honesty, I would just have to say I would have said a good old search engine, but now they've gone and chucked that into it, the GPTs as well. So that actually makes it easier to digest and probably only as believable as the other one because of biases and things like that. Depends what you're searching for. If you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I'd have just said an O'Reilly book. The good old O'Reilly books are great resources for technology and things like that. And there's countless books of theirs that I've got on anything from incident response to DevSecOps to this, that, and the other. But of course, once they're published, they then become out of date. Yeah. And on the internet, you search, how often do you come back with out of date results? Quite often. Yeah, it's a difficult thing. I think the most critical thing actually is having that ability to research and to critically question the answers you get. And other than that, the resource you use doesn't matter. It's whatever's most easily available to you.
Right. So would you go with artificial intelligence apps?
Artificial intelligence balanced with common sense.
Okay. One underrated skill that could help somebody to outstun.
I've got to return to inquisitiveness.
If somebody's starting today, what is the first thing that they should learn?
I can't pick one thing. I'd either pick, you either go down learning command line, understanding network, or understanding coding.
What do you think would be a good entry role?
Well, I suppose taking a bias, starting in as a junior analyst in a SOC is a good introduction that puts you in a safe frame of a team where you will likely have people who can mentor you. You'll probably have a wide range of access to different tools and experiences.
In your opinion, what would be a mistake that a beginner usually makes when they are in entry roles?
Accepting the media romanticism of what the industry is actually like.
A series or movie that you would recommend to watch?
I always have fond memory for War Games because that was the first one I ever saw. Mr. Robot was a very good series. Yeah. I think Mr. Robot did a very good representation of that reality from a different side.
Yeah. And last question, the thing that you enjoy the most in this career?
New things. Everything you look into offers some new way of looking at it, new way of dealing with it or responding to it, new technology. You've heard I bounce from data to coding to this, that, and I apply it to not just technology. I enjoy creative stuff as well in writing stories and things like that. And I also enjoy other woodwork and things like that. But that's just making things. So in computers, I just make things.
And that brings us to the end of another incredible episode of Cyber Stories Unlocked. A huge thank you to Rue Garner for sharing his remarkable journey. It's inspiring to see how foundational skills in IT can evolve and open doors to entirely new careers paths. There is a lot to take away from today's conversation. It's all about adaptability, leveraging your past experiences to tackle new challenges head on. I hope this episode gave you some valuable insights, whether you are considering a career pivot or just curious about the intersection of IT and cybersecurity. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with somebody who might find it helpful. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Cyber Stories Unlocked. Until next time, stay curious, stay resilient, and keep pushing those boundaries. See you in the next episode.